How does someone with all the cards stacked against them go on to build a multi-million-dollar business, thrive as a husband and father, and maintain a healthy lifestyle? Well, in this episode, we sit down with Tony Clark, a high school dropout who battled with addiction but self-developed to come out the other side victorious. You're listening to Take a Step, the podcast that helps driven young professionals turn their inspiration into application. My name is Josh Johnston. Let's take a step. Tony Clark, welcome to the Take a Step podcast. Happy to finally have you on the show, and I am excited about this one.
Hey, I appreciate it. Honestly, I appreciate you having me on the show. I'm excited to, share my story and try something new. This is something new for me. So, they say get outside your comfort zone. This is definitely one of those things that's doing it.
I love it. Awesome.
I appreciate you having me.
Of course, man. Yeah, let's just dive right in. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the Take a Step community, however you think it makes sense.
Sure. My name's Tony Clark. I am a business owner. I own an industrial and safety supply company. It's called National Industrial and Safety Supply. What's unique about my story is I started at a very young age in my line of work. I started when I was 16 years old. I've done the same line of work since I was 16. I never did anything else. Basically, I dropped out of high school at a young age. I had to get a job immediately. That was the stipulation of me dropping out. My mom basically said, hey, if you're willing to go out and get a job, I'll sign off on you dropping out. But you need to get your GED and you need to have a job within 2 months of dropping out. And so that's what I did. I got my GED immediately. I applied to 2 or 3 places. I applied to Denny's to be a dishwasher. I applied to a fast food place. And then I applied to a telemarketing office in Olympia, Washington. And the 2 other places didn't call me back. The telemarketing office hired me on the spot. So I started that job. I started working for a company called California Contractor Supplies. And I was terrible. It was essentially a telemarketing job. Where you sell safety glasses and safety supplies over the telephone to large businesses and government agencies. Being 16 years old, I had the voice of a 16-year-old. So I sounded like a kid on the phone, which actually made it very hard for me starting in the business. To give you an idea, and I always joke about this with my new hires, I got called ma'am for like the first few months on the phone. I had guys
like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, because I sounded like my voice was so high. I'm a kid, 16,
yeah.
Right? So anytime we have a new person come in and they're getting kicked around a bit on the phone, I always tell them that story of, hey, I'm the boss now. And when I started here, they were calling me ma'am.
That's great. There's not much lower than that.
Exactly. If you can make it through that, you can make it through anything. But that being said, I was just young and inexperienced as well. So I did not do good at sales. I was actually very bad at first. So I basically became their computer guy for about 3 years. And then 3 years into doing that, I was looking around at the salespeople that I worked with, and I was seeing the commissions that they were making. And, I'm 19, 20 years old at that point. I needed to make more money. I wasn't making enough, just being the computer guy. And I told the owner that, hey, I'd like to give sales another shot. And there was a particular trainer that worked for that company that I wanted to work under. Because I saw a lot. We had 30 offices at that time. And I saw the way a lot of the other offices were run. And the way that particular trainer ran his office was much more disciplined, and he had much higher performers than the other offices we had. When I told the owner that, he said, listen, I can do that for you, Tony, but once you go over there, you don't work for me anymore. You work for that trainer. So I can't, once you go over there, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. So I kind of took a leap of faith on it and said, nope, that's what I want to do. I want to become a good salesperson. And I think that this guy can train me. And that trainer's name was Ray Kunimoto. I still talk to him to this day. He's a mentor of mine. He absolutely changed the trajectory of my life. He was the first man in my life that sat me down and actually believed in me and said, "Hey man, I know you don't think you're good at this, but I can make you great at it if you just follow my instructions." And he did.
Was that the first person for you that kind of gave you that, essentially that belief coming from someone else, or were there other influences in your life?
No, that was the first. And don't get me wrong, the owner of the company, Willard, was a great influence and mentor. Yeah. But he was he was the owner, right? Like, he wasn't training people. He wasn't worried about the development of the salespeople and the people that work there. He left that up to the managers. And a lot of the managers weren't very good at that. Ray, in particular, was exceptional. Within 4 years, within 1 year, I went from never making a commission paycheck to consecutively every single week hitting a commission paycheck. I think my first year with him, I made $50,000, which to me this was back in 2004.
Loaded.
I made it, right? And then year after year of working with him, that number grew. And in 2008, after 4 years of working with him and he developed me a lot. My mindset, everything changed under Ray. My ability to, have an actual vision for where I wanted to go and raising my standards and just believing in my ability to figure things out. He really instilled that in me. And within 4 years, I was making close to 6 figures a year. I was promoted to an office manager for that company, and I was given my own office and began training people. And that was kind of my downfall at that time, because I was given a lot of money. I went from, making, 70, 80,000 a year to making 100 to 150 grand a year at the age of 20.
How old were you at that time?
I was 21 when I started working with him. So okay. I was 25. I was 25 when I got what we call coded, where they would give you a code. And what that code meant is that you get a much larger percentage, but you are expected now to open your own office and hire your own people and train them up. And I did really good at that for the first year. But with that extra income and a lot of free time, I started drinking a lot. I started spending a lot of time at the casino and just making decisions that, a 25-year-old kid makes when he's got a lot of time and money on his hands without the right guidance. So I went through a rough patch there. I got a couple DUIs. I ended up dealing with a lot of stress and, things that I brought on myself because I didn't have the right guidance. Once Ray, coded me, that was kind of like him kicking me out of the nest and saying, okay, you got to go do this on your own. From 2008 till about 2013 those 5 years were a rough 5 years for me. I got addicted to drugs. I got heavy into drinking. I was, in and out of court for DUIs, things like that. And in 2013, when all of that ended, that's when I came across the book, Success is Not an Accident. And we can go into more detail on that later on, but coming across that book and really embodying what that book taught and what Tommy talks about in that book, as far as, God didn't put you here to be mediocre. And the only way that you can be the best version of yourself and who God has put you here to be is by, sitting down and figuring out what is your vision for the best version of yourself. When you're looking into the future, how do you see yourself as the best version of you? And writing that down and making it clear and really spending time on clarifying that was a huge game changer for me. So like, as far as Ray being a really good trainer for me, he was a great trainer. He taught me how to be a very good salesperson. And he did teach us a little bit of the foundational stuff of, you should have goals and you should have things that you're aiming for. He never broke it down the way that book breaks it down. And when I started doing the lessons in that book, I mean, my family members, my coworkers, the people around me, they immediately noticed a difference. They're like, what's changed in you? Like, you're showing up early for work. You're staying late. Your numbers are going way up. Like, my entire life had a positive boost from that book initially. So that was a huge influence on me saying, you know what? The environment that I'm currently in is not the environment I'm going to do the best in. I need to get out of this office and I need to have my own thing. And from 2013 until 2015, that's exactly what I did. I left that office and started my own, again, under California contractors. And I was, fairly successful. I did well. But as I was growing, like in my personal development journey, you kind of start asking yourself, is this the best place for me to be? Like, that company that I worked for, we had a very, I hate to say this, but if you've ever seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street, where it's a party culture, drugs, alcohol, party. That was the culture of that company. And it's great when you're, 23 years old and making a lot of money. But once you start getting a little bit older and you start looking around at your life and you realize, I'm looking at the guys above me and I don't want what they have. Maybe this isn't the right place for me. And I came to the conclusion that the only way that I could grow my business into what I wanted to grow it into was by creating my own business and not working under the umbrella of this company that I had worked under for 15 years at that point. And I was very close with the owners. I was, I was the best man at his son's wedding. He was my roommate for many years. We were very close. I was part of the family. So leaving that company that had treated me fairly well for a long period of time was very difficult. So when I came to that conclusion that I needed to leave, it was almost like for a lack of a better term, it was like a lightning bolt had struck. When I actually decided, you know what, I know I can do what they do and I can do it better. I've got the hard part down. The marketing is the hard part. What they were doing is basically the logistical. Yeah. They were supplying the products and they were shipping. So I started studying logistics and started looking into the manufacturers and who they were getting stuff from. And after doing a little bit of research, I basically talked with the owner of the company and said, hey, Willie, I'm going to start buying my own stuff and I'm going to start my own thing. And he wasn't upset with me. I know it probably broke his heart because I worked with them for a long time and I done a lot of, training and helped with a lot of the other offices. But from that point forward, my success multiplied. From that point forward, I went from just focusing on making money to focusing on creating an actual better life, not just making money, but creating a family and developing myself more and all that stuff. From 2016 until now, we have seen massive growth. It was the best decision that I've ever made, leaving that company and starting my own. My customers are happier. Salespeople are happier. Overall, it was the right decision to make, and I'm glad I did. That being said, now my company, it went from doing $1 million a year in 2017 to we're doing over $6 million this year in volume. Not only that, I own I have 5 rental properties in Olympia. I'm now happily married with 2 children. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, Abby and Tyler. And basically that's where it's at now.
Yeah.
I went from being a regular telemarketer for a company and looked at what they were doing and said, how can I add value to what they're doing here? And I started my own, and that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, no, that I love kind of hearing the beginning, middle of it, and end to how you got from where you're at to where you're at now. Let's jump back a little bit because I want to break a lot of that down. When you were first getting started, and I kind of remember what you were saying with regards to when you first started to experience that little bit of success, and how that transpired into some of the decisions you were making at that time that led you down a wrong path. When you look back on that time in your life, what were some of the things that you felt like were causing you to take not necessarily the right steps that were going to put you in the right positions?
So that's actually a good question. And it's a really hard one to pinpoint, because I could say it's a lack of like supervision. Like, I grew up in the 80s and the early 90s, right? I'm one of them kids, we played outside. My parents weren't around a lot. I grew up in Key West for my younger childhood with my dad and my stepmom. They weren't around a lot when we were kids. And then later on in my childhood, I moved up with my real mother in Olympia, Washington, and she worked all the time. We lived in a little 2-bedroom apartment, and she worked her butt off to keep us off public assistance. And she tried her hard. I'll give it. My mom tried her hardest with me, right? And I was just a kid who was in trouble a lot. And I think I have 2 sisters, and they had the same parents I had, and they had the same environment. They were both straight A students, both went to college. They both got degrees. So they didn't go down the same path. So it's easy for me to point and say, oh, well, it's because my parents weren't there and I didn't have the supervision and the guidance that I needed. But the reality is my sisters had the same environment I did, and they did fine in it. So to pinpoint one exact thing, if I had to, I would say it was a cry for attention. I would say I got attention when I got in trouble. And the more I got in trouble, the more attention I got.
And it sounds like a lot of those decisions got you to a certain point where you were starting to experience a lot of self-inflicted hardship, right? And you kind of went through that phase from, I think you were saying, like 2008 to 2013. That was that 5-year period where you were really trying to figure out, hey, like, I'm experiencing all this success. I'm this 25-year-old kid that got handed the keys to build whatever he wants to build with a large paycheck, with authority. And I'd imagine that comes with, you get attention when you get put in that position. So it was probably fuel to the fire. So with a lot of the situations that you put yourself in, when you talk about the DUIs, when you talk about, issues with drugs and things like that, do you think a lot of those hardships have kind of step by step pieced together and mold you into who you are today?
So first off, I just want to point this out, that I was not, it wasn't just from 2008 till 2013. Like, as a kid, like, you understand, I dropped out of high school at the age of 16. Okay? I had 0 credits in high school when I dropped out. All right. I skipped class. I was running around with the wrong crowd. It didn't start in 2008. That magnified, right? Like, when you gave me the keys to the kingdom and the fat paycheck, all of a sudden that magnified a lot of the things that I was already doing prior to that, right? I really just think that was a magnification of, now nobody can I'm more successful than my parents. I can do whatever I want. I'm making tons of money. I'm doing better than what anyone ever thought I would ever do. The high school dropout is making 6 figures. He's working 6 hours a day, making more than people working double overtime shifts at that time. It was a combination of, I already had a bad mindset. And then on top of that, I learned a skill where I could make a lot of money. And gave myself the freedom to get in a lot more trouble.
So you go through this period, and then you read Success is Not an Accident. Tell me, let's dive into that. I want to hear about, how'd you come across the book? What were you thinking when you read it, and how have you applied it, and what's the impact it's had on you?
And we've talked about this when I very first met you. But when I first came across Success is Not an Accident, it's a very, even when I tell the story, I'm like, it's just such a weird way to come across it. I had bought my mother a Kindle for Christmas a couple years prior to coming across the book. And my mom never used this Kindle. So like a year after I'd given it to her, she's like, hey, I never use this Kindle. You can have it back. You can gift it to someone else. It literally just sits here collecting dust. So I was like, okay. Well, I took the Kindle back, and it sat in my house for like a year. Never even used it. Well, at the time, this was a time period that I was battling with alcoholism and drug addiction. I randomly picked it up one morning and just turned it on. And there was a free book on it called Success is Not an Accident. And just I think I read like 2 pages of it. I read the first 2 pages. And it did just right out the gate. I was like, man, this is an interesting book. I like the concept, the way that Tommy introed the book. So every now and then I'd go back and I'd read a couple more pages of it. And eventually the part that hooked me on the book, and I've talked to you about this before as well, was the dartboard. Mm-hmm. In one of the first chapters of the book, Tommy uses a dartboard in a dark room as an analogy for having a vision and setting your goals. And I remember when I read this concept, and it's a very simple concept. I mean, it's very simple. But when I read it, it really resonated. And essentially what that concept is if we put a dartboard up in a room and we blindfold you and we hand you 5 darts to hit that dartboard, how likely are you to hit that dartboard? Very unlikely. Yeah. Now, if we take the blindfold off of you and we say hit that dartboard, how much more likely are you to hit it? You're much more likely. Not only are you much more likely, but you actually have a chance of even hitting the bullseye. And essentially what that was an analogy for, you're blindfolded if you don't have an idea of who you want to be and what you want to become. You don't have any idea of that, well, then you're just walking blind. If you sit down for a few hours, and that's what's so crazy about this, it's just a few hours of your life. If you sit down for a few hours and just ask yourself, who do you want to be and what do you want to become? How do you want people to look at you and perceive you? That was a paradigm shifting concept for me. And then, there's a lot of other concepts in the book, but that was the one where after that, I sat down and probably read the rest of that book in 3-4 days, right? It hooked me. And once again, after I read the book, I did the workbook. I've done the workbook probably at least 4 times since 2012 when I discovered the book. So mind you, it wasn't like I discovered Success is Not an Accident and then my life just changed and everything was great. No, I went through a lot of bad stuff after I discovered that book, right? But I had it as a foundation. I had this new concept of personal development, of writing down goals, having a vision, et cetera, et cetera. From that point of discovering Success is Not an Accident and kind of just discovering personal development, I started using it on my trainees. I started making my trainees write goals. I started making all my, my sales trainees have their quarterly goals, weekly goals, yearly goals, writing down the traits that they want associated with, writing down the things that they're grateful for, all the things that are in that book, things that were to me at the time, some brand new concept. And now that I've been in personal development for a while, I'm like, no, this has been around forever. People have been doing this stuff a long time. Just to give you an idea, 2012 was when I very first read the book. 2013 is when I left that office that I was in with all those other salespeople and started my own. Because I realized through writing my goals and actually having a vision for myself in the future that I couldn't have the future I wanted in that office.
Yeah.
And then it only took me a couple years after leaving that office to realize, it's kind of this company's culture that is keeping me stuck where I'm at. And once again, it wasn't that I wasn't making good money. Okay? Financially, by most people's metric, I was doing well. I was a young guy making 6 figures a year. I was off work by 2:30 p.m. every day. I had it wasn't like I was working my butt off, right? But there was just something more. And this is something that I really hope, if there's anyone listening to this that feels in their life like everyone thinks you're doing well, but in your heart you feel like there's something more for you, that is a sign that there is something more for you. And follow that feeling, because it is real. And luckily for me, I did follow it. And it took that idea of success that I used to have, like, oh, I make a lot of money and I have all the freedom in the world to do what I want. Well, that's not success. Okay, that's great. That's good that you're in a material way doing well. But in an emotional and in a spiritual way, I was very empty. I didn't feel like I was fulfilling my purpose in life. And leaving the company that I worked for and starting something where I could actually add value to my customers and add value to my sales team, that was my goal. I said to myself, we're not giving our customers a good deal. We're kind of taking advantage of them. We're selling a subpar product at a high price. Essentially, the reason we were so successful is we were just so good at sales. We were so good at marketing that we could talk anyone into buying whatever it is that we were selling. So being able to differentiate and to look and say, hey, it's not just about making money. It's about doing something that you're proud of doing. That was a big shift in what I thought success was.
So how has it shifted? Like when you talked about like searching for your purpose, like you felt like that purpose wasn't being fulfilled in the material and the financial success that everyone else viewed that you had. How has that shifted from then until now?
So, just to be frank with you, what it is I did not want to die and look back on my life and think that what I had done was acceptable just because I made money. I wanted to look back on my life and be able to say that I created something that made the world a better place, that added value to people in the community, that added value to my employees as well as to my customers. Not just so I could make money. I wanted to create something that when I look back on it, I'm proud of. And I'm not kidding when I say this. When I had the idea to start NIS Supply and to leave California, it was literally like lightning had struck. Like when I had this idea and I'm sitting there writing out this idea, I can tell you to this day, I still have the plan written up. It's a folder right behind me, right? I knew without a shadow of a doubt, Josh, I did not have any fear of failure. I knew, and I mean this from my heart. Like I knew when I started that company with the knowledge I had, the wisdom that had been passed on to me from Ray and just the years of being in that line of work. Honestly, I was like, anybody going up against me, I feel bad.
See, I find that so unique because that's like most people that like the thing that keeps most people from starting is that fear, whether if it's fear of failure, whether if it's fear of, and I talk about this all the time, hence the name Take a Step. It's the fear of failure. It's the fear of judgment of others. It's the fear of feeling like you're not good enough. Like there's so many different components that tie into that fear. So that's very unique that wasn't even a question for you.
And you want to know what's funny now that you say it like that? It might be because my whole life I've already felt that fear of not being enough and all this other stuff. But I will say this. I believe the reason I was not afraid And the reason I was so confident in what I was doing when I created the company is, starting on that personal development journey and really putting time into it. Not just reading books and saying I read the book. No, sitting down and doing the work in those books. Brendan Burchard has a very good quote that he says a lot. He says, competence breeds confidence. And what I believe is in that personal development journey, it gave me just enough confidence. I apologize. Just enough competence to make me confident to leave that company that I'd been with for so long and been so close with and start my own. I will say this. If the only thing that made me a little apprehensive of starting my own company was I was making very good money. And I was like, man, they're already paying me really well. Am I going to mess this thing up? But my confidence in myself was extremely high. Yeah. And honestly, like I said, I really went into it with, I feel bad for anybody that goes against me. I was so confident. And just to be honest, another thing is like, this was my mission. Like in Success is Not an Accident, as you write your mission statement, it became my mission. And it's one of those things like, for me, I feel like when I sat down and I created that mission, it wasn't something I did haphazardly. I took it really seriously. And I took all things in my life into account at the time. And it was something that it was me and God. Like I was sitting down there with a piece of paper and a pen and my consciousness and God. And I knew that this was the path that God wanted me to take. And I knew that if God was on my side, nobody can stop me. And I knew that this wasn't like I thought. No, this was a true, deep-rooted faith in the fact that this is the direction that God wants me to take my life in. And if I am willing to give myself up and really dedicate myself to it, nobody can stop me. Yeah. And that's really hard to say when, at the time, I'm $80,000 in debt to the IRS, back taxes, right? I had $50,000 to my name. I was renting a home. I didn't own anything. I had a car that I paid a car payment. And I took that $50,000 that I should have put towards taxes and I started this company. That's how much faith that I had in starting this thing. That $50,000 in 2016 has turned into tens of millions of dollars. Yeah. So that just goes to show you the power of genuinely sitting down and getting real with yourself and getting real with God and actually submitting and saying, okay, if this is what you want me to do, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to give them heck doing it. Yeah. And here I am, 8 years later, and I've had massive success by most people's metric. Mm-hmm. And I'm happier than I've ever been. I have a beautiful family. I own my own home. I own 5 other homes that I rent out. And I have a lot of other things going, like, with investments and things that have, it's like a dream come true. Yeah. And it all started with just sitting down and getting real and not doing it in a cliche way, but doing it in a real, like, this is your life, man. You get one shot at this. And at the end of your life, you're going to look back on it and you get to decide, are you happy with what you did or not? And that's what really fueled my desire to start the company and what really I went into it with no fear at all.
Yeah, and it sounds like I want to dive in a little bit with how that relates to when you get real about, hey, this is my one life. How am I going to make the most of it? Not only investing in yourself and betting on yourself to start the company, but also investing in your own personal development, right? You've talked a lot about personal development and how you've been on this journey, and from reading Success is Not an Accident to then reaching out to Tommy, joining the 1% Club, which is his group of high performers that invests in themselves so that they can become the best version of themselves and continuously and relentlessly pursue their full potential. So for you, tell me a little bit about the impact that not necessarily the impact, but what you've learned since making the decision to not on yourself and invest in yourself.
Sure. And I would like to, I've been a member of the 1% Club for a little over a year now. Absolute game changer. As far as my daily routine, my consistency, man, I keep telling Charlie and Tommy, I go, all you got to do is ask my wife. My wife will tell you. She hates the fact I got to go once a quarter to Atlanta, but man, she loves the results from it. So The one thing I will say on this, it's a perfect follow-up from what I just said, is everybody, and don't get me wrong, personal development can be expensive. You could spend $500 a year. You could spend $50,000 and more on personal development. At the end of the day, it does not matter, in my opinion, it does not matter how much money you spend. It is the time. It is the action you take. Okay. You can, there's plenty of people out there buying courses and spending money on personal development and doing all this stuff. And the reality is, unless you're actually doing your homework, unless you're sitting down and taking the time to really sit and plan these things out and to clarify your vision and to raise your standards and just specify your standards. There's a lot of people out there, you could ask them, so what are your financial standards? They don't know. What are your family standards? What are your friendship standards? Things of that nature. They have no idea. And that's actually normal because it's not something that's taught to us in school, right? So that is something that is taught in personal development. It's something that's helped me greatly. But to answer your question, I don't think, as far as the monetary part goes, I spend quite a bit on personal development. It's worth every single penny to me. But at the end of the day, the reason why it's worth it to me is I follow through on the lessons and I take the time to do, the workbooks and the questionnaires and really sit and take them seriously. At the end of the day, your life is only as good as you're willing to make it. And if you don't take that serious and really plan it out, you're going to wonder why guys like me, who are high school dropouts, who've gone through all these issues in their life, are doing so well. How is it that guy can do so well? Well, I just wrote down what I wanted and followed through and took action to accomplish it. I mean, I know that sounds like very simple and like, watering it down, but the reality is that's what personal development does for most people. It makes them sit down for a minute, slow down, get an idea of what you want your personal life, family life, your business life, your financial life. What do you want them to look like? And how are you going to get them to that point? So as far as the question you asked, I don't think a monetary thing matters. I really think how much time you're willing to put into it is what's going to matter. I'll be honest with you. Everybody listening to this, just go get Success is Not an Accident and do that. And I promise you that will change enough in your life to where you'll look at personal development and say, hey, where else can I invest in my personal development?
Yeah. You talk about, I love about how, what you say about, it sounds simple, right? You say just clarify your plan and take action. There's a quote that I heard that I love. It's success is simple, but it's not easy. The path to success is very simple when you actually look at it and break it down. But just because it's simple, it doesn't mean that it's easy. What keeps people from doing the simple thing is staying consistent with it, is having the discipline to have a very simple process and do it over and over and over and over again.
100%. And you want to know what's funny is that applies directly to sales. And I think maybe that's why it was so easy for me to immerse myself in personal development. Sales is very similar to that. It's simple. But there's a lot of nuances in stuff that you need to master in order to make yourself a high performer. And it's the same with personal development. You can write your goals, but there's a right way and a wrong way to write goals, right? If you're sitting there saying, and Tommy goes over this, and Success is Not an Accident, and once again, I highly recommend if you're on your personal development journey, read that book. Don't write down, I don't want to be fat. Write down, I want to be healthier. Or write down, I am healthy, right? Those things, I keep every one of my goal books sitting behind me on a bookshelf, and I read through them at least once every few months, just to remind myself of how far I've come. And I can see the quality in those books every single time I rewrite it go up, because I realize, wait a minute, the more precise and the more I clarify and write this in the right way, the more effective it is for me. So, once again, it is simple. Write your goals, but how are you writing your, right? So there are caveats to that stuff. The truth is, though, is you just got to start. You got to take action and get started. You got to crawl before you walk. You got to walk before you run. You're not just going to write down some goals and knock it out of the park. But once again, you got to start somewhere. So,
hey, as we say here, all you got to do is just take a step.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly right.
So being where you are right now, having, over the course of your personal development journey, having, the journey of starting and building your business to where it's at right now, in the position you're at now, if you could go back and meet with the old Tony Clark, what's one piece of wisdom, one piece of advice that you would share with him that you've learned over the course of your career?
So it would, I read 3 mantras every morning, and one of them is, and it's, in my opinion, the most important one, is to seek wisdom. I would tell myself to read books, get Audible, and, just don't be afraid to educate yourself. I didn't think that I was capable of educating myself before I read Success is Not an Accident. After I read that book, I realized, wow, I've become a much better person just from following this simple workbook in here. And it's what opened me up to reading a lot more books. Stephen Covey, Jim Rohn, the list. I've read hundreds of personal development books now, and it all started with that one. And if there's one thing that's, shifted my, my reality more than anything, it's been my personal development journey. So I would tell myself to read books, educate yourself. I love it.
One final question I want to ask that I ask every, at the end of every episode, in line with the name Take a Step. My purpose for naming the podcast Take a Step is, I feel like so many people get caught in the trap of feeling like they're just doing what they're supposed to do in life. They fall in this, structure that they feel like their grandparents went through, their parents went through. They went to high school, they went to college, they got their degree, they got their entry-level job. And the last thing I wanted to do with my life was wake up at some point and, having built a career and built success like you were talking about earlier, quote unquote, but hating what I do. I never wanted that to happen. So for me, I found that it was such a struggle for me just to take that first step, to take action on pursuing the passions and the purpose that I really had. So in your opinion, why is it so hard for people to take that first step into living a life that's in line with their real purpose and passions?
I'm going to take a quote from Brendan Burchard again on this one. I hate to use him twice here, but there's a quote that Brendan Burchard uses that he says, "Believe in your ability to figure things out." That's the quote. You have to believe in your ability to figure things out. And I think a lot of people in our culture, we don't believe in our ability to figure things out on our own. We think that, if we don't know something, we just need to call a professional on it. Or, like, for example, when I was a salesperson for that company, I thought, logistics and stocking and shipping items, I could never do that. And then when I looked into it, I was like, no, this is way easier than selling the product. They're doing the easy part. So, believing in your ability to figure things out is uncommon in a lot of people. And I think the people that do believe in their ability to figure things out, those are the people that do live the life they want to live. As far as, taking the first step, I do think that that's a big issue, even in the personal development field, is people learn a lot of stuff about personal development. They read a lot of books. They learn all the quotes. They like all the memes and all that stuff, but they never take action on the stuff they learn. And I think that's my advantage, is I'm not afraid to lose. Like, I've failed over and over. I just told you my story of having an office, failing, getting with another office, failing, and just keeping going. You can't be afraid. A lot of people are afraid to fail. And you just have to understand that everybody's afraid of that. Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, they all have that same fear. Everybody has in the back of their mind that, hey, what if this doesn't work out? But the people that just do it anyways, they're the ones when I always say, because I grew up in Key West, I'd be out on the docks and I'd see this old guy coming in on his huge boat, right? Like on his yacht.
Yeah.
I think to myself, how the heck did that guy make so much money that he could have a boat like that? And I can promise you this, more than likely, he took massive action and he believed in his ability to figure things out. I think in most cases, if you sat down and talked to those guys, you would realize they're not perfect. They've made mistakes. They failed, but they did it anyways. I would say as far as people not living out their dreams, they're just they don't believe in their ability to figure things out, and they should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great quote that I love on that is, inspiration is pointless with no application.
100%. And I run into it a lot with my trainees that I'm trying to develop, is they know all the stuff I'm telling them, because we've gone over it, but they don't apply it, right? And then they get mad when someone new comes along and they're killing them in volume. And it's like, well, what are they doing different? Well, they're applying the same things more. They don't know anything you don't know. They're just applying what they know more than the other people around. And that's where I think my success came from, I just didn't stop. I just kept going. If I failed, let's try it another way. Fail doing that, let's try it another way. Yeah. So, as far as people not living out their dreams, it's a very common thing. And I talk to employees and people I work with on a regular basis about it. It always comes down to not believing in their ability to figure things out and not taking action on the things they do.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Tony, this has been a great conversation. I've taken a lot away from this conversation, a lot that I know a lot of the listeners will as well. I've had a good time. Hope you have as well.
I have to. I appreciate you bearing with me, man. This is my first time ever doing anything like this. So I know I can talk fast sometimes and things like that. I hope it's legible and easy to understand. And I'm sure you're going to be busy with your edits later. So.
No, it's all good. Guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Take a Step podcast. If you've enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe. And we will talk to you in the next episode. Peace.